Hello, this is Hooked by Happenstance. I'm Kendra, and it is time for chapter 42 of Yarn Tales. The exciting thing about chapter 42 is it begins shawl number 4. There's been a purple one, a blue one, a green one, and today we start a yellow one, which is really super exciting. So, for those of you that do not know, Yarn Tales is my ongoing series here at Hooked by Happenstance, where I read books, tell you a bit about them, then I apply silly Kendra rules to my star rating of the book, and I add a segment to my Yarn Tales shawl. Now, originally, I had planned to make one shawl because I thought I would read 12 to 15 books this year, and I'd been gifted a bunch of yarn, and I had thought, I'll put these together and come up with something. Well, this project has been quite successful in getting me to become a more active reader once again. I've been on about a decade hiatus of high reading, at least for myself. I've been reading plenty to my children, but I've been trying to add in more personal reading because I think that that's important and it makes me happy. And this whole project right now is definitely like my happy place, so I'm enjoying it. Enjoying it so much that that idea of 12 to 15 books for the entire year was completed by the end of February. So then I made a second shawl for March, and then I started making a shawl for April. But in April, I read more than one shawl's worth of books. So I ended up starting another shawl. I had exhausted all of the yarn that I bought for my third shawl, which was the green one, and so it was time to move on, plus the shawl was plenty big, and I'm trying to not only make shawls that like kind of make sense with my reading schedule, but also are a wearable size, because there's no point in making something if I'm not going to use it in the end. So it was time to break off and start a new shawl. So this shawl begins with the audiobooks and physical books that I read starting on my trip at the end of April to do a craft show. I went to do Tulip Festival in Wamego, which was a 2-day show, but there was a day of setup, and I actually went the night early, and then my family all came out and we stayed at a cabin and had a vacation. So I consumed a lot of audiobooks and physical books in a short period of time because I listened to audiobooks while I was driving, I listened to audiobooks in the cabin when I was alone, I listened to them while I was setting up my booth. So there was a lot of audiobooking going on in a short period of time, so this was a good place to start my fourth shawl, my brightest shawl yet, my yellow shawl. So now I'm going to introduce you to the yarns for this shawl, and then we'll talk about the book, and then I'll show you my bebe shawl and where I'm at for it so far. Gonna be a few changes in this fourth shawl from the 3 previous. In the 3 previous shawls, I've been using 4 colors. I'm going to drop it down to only using 3. One for physical books, one for audiobooks, both of those that I consume by myself, and then a color for any book I consume with my kids, physical or audiobook. So those are going to be how it works out. I realized that I wasn't really reading my Life's Library books the way I thought I would because the books haven't been as much to my taste as I had hoped they would be. And I also have had to kind of space out when I read some of them, especially the nonfiction titles, a bit more than I thought. So there's not ending up with the Life's Library, which is a subscription service where I get a new book every 6 weeks. They're not showing up in every shawl. So I decided that I would just count those as physical books when I read them, and I'll tell you that's where I got the book. So I'm using 3 yarns. 2 of those yarns were gifted to me by Carla, and one of the yarns I purchased myself. Because after I started that first shawl, and I realized this was going to be a bigger project, I bought more yarn than I have probably ever bought in my life as far as hand-dyed yarn goes. And I thought I had bought yarn that was going to get me most of the way through the year. I was wrong. And I had picked out the yarn for the different shawls. I was light on the yarn that I wanted for the yellow shawl, but I figured, I had months and months and months till I had to think about that. I didn't. I had months, a couple of months. I had like 8 weeks, and then I needed to think about it. But in the meantime, Carla had sent me the perfect yarns. So I added the one yellow that I had in with hers, and I think it's all gonna play super nice. So this is the yarn that I'll be using for audiobooks. I have 2 skeins of this. It's fingering weight, and this is Vitalana by Knit Crate. And this is in the colorway Bananas. It's a 75% superwash merino, 15% nylon, 10% cashmere, and it has 437 yards for 100 grams. So there are 2 balls of this, like I said, and I listen to a lot of audiobooks, so this is probably going to be the primary color of my yellow shawl, and I'm all about that. That's very, very exciting to me. The next yarn that was gifted to me was the yarn that I'm going to use for the books with my kids. This is by Yarn Indulgences. It is a Zed Cashmerino Sock Flora. Oh, Flora must be the colorway. And it is 80% superwash merino wool, 10% cashmere, 10% nylon, 378 yards per 115 grams. This is made and hand-dyed in Canada. And it's got this like kind of creamy background with these pops of golds and yellows and a little bit of like a hot pink. So this will be a nice little combination with that banana color. And the final color is a yarn that I bought myself from Twin Mommy Creations. This is the colorway Like a Honeybee to a Sunflower. It is an 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon, 113 grams, 435 yards. In here is what it looks like, and it's just got all of these yummy dark and light kind of golden oranges and yellows. I haven't balled the second two up yet because the shawl opens with a number of chapters of audiobooks. So that is all that I've balled up so far. Alright, so obviously it is a different day than when I introduced you to all the yarns for the shawl, but now it is time to talk about the first book that I read at the end of April to start shawl number 4. So, the book that we're going to talk about today is called The Nest by Cynthia Dupree Sweeney. And it is the story of the Plum family. There are 4 siblings, and their family's really well off, but when their dad dies, he takes all that money and puts it in an estate and basically doesn't want them to touch it till the youngest of them turns 40 because he did not want them to grow up basically not having to worry about things. They knew they had this safety net. But despite his best efforts, you know, and keeping it out of their hands, they all basically made life plans knowing that there was this net. They called it the nest, just waiting for them at this point in time. So they have been making life choices depending on this money that is, you know, just sitting out here. They know it exists. Well, the story picks up with some worries because the mother uses the nest, because she has some control over it, to help deal with the situation that one of the brothers gets himself into. And thus, it becomes a situation that they've all gotten into. So this story talks about the 4 siblings, kind of gives you background on their life, where they're at, and their expectations for this money, and then also how they all kind of interact because of it, and the kind of waiting for the money to occur or not. So, this book was alright. I listened to it in audiobook form. I listened to it while I was kind of getting things put together at the last minute and like packing up for my craft show at the end of April. I listened to it in the car on the way there. Basically the next batch of books that you hear me talk about are all books. I listened to a ton of audiobooks in this craft show event timeline. So this is the first one. It was just meh. It was 3 stars. There was nothing wrong with this book per se. There was nothing that offended me about it. I just like the characters all lacked some emotional like depth. I never felt invested in the story or any of the characters. Like there are plenty of times where I'll read a book where I will only feel invested in one character or one plot line, even if there's many. But I just didn't really like feel a pull to any of them in particular. And I just didn't find any of the plot lines all that interesting. It all worked out in a way that was satisfactory to me, but basically any way the story worked out would have been satisfactory to me. So, I don't know. This is definitely like a, you could totally skip this book, but if you're looking for something to just kind of have on in the background, this would be a decent choice. I would recommend it for that. I wouldn't recommend it if you're trying to listen or read something that's really going to enthrall you. This is not that book. But this is definitely a book where you won't miss out if you daydream in the middle and come back. You'll be able to pick it up just fine. So, let's take a peek at my teeny tiny baby shawl before we go today. So, the way that these shawls work is I have a number of different yarns, each of them for a different, topic, as I discussed. This is the yarn for audiobooks by myself, which this yarn is called Vitalana by Knit Crate, and it is in the color Bananas, and it is bananas. How bright yellow this is, and it's going to be amazing. So each of the yarns, I also have a patterned row that I do for it, and then after I do the pattern segment, I do a row of textured single crochet for each star that I gave the book. So we're starting off with a bright yellow neckband for my shawl, with a nice patterned row, and then 3 rows of the textured single crochet. And I've been asked what textured single crochet is. It just means that I alternate front loop, back loop across, and it ends up with a really nice texture. I also then, if I do like an increase, I'll do front and back in the same loop and then keep going from there. So it ends up with a very simple way of working that ends up looking more difficult than it is, and I think it really brings out some of the yarns. So I've been enjoying doing that. And that is it for this week. If you would like to catch up on past shawls or past chapters of the Yarn Tales series, you can check out the playlist here on the channel, and I will see you all next time. Bye!